Hello and welcome to the RTE Soccer Podcast. I'm Anthony Pyne and I'm very happy to be joined by Paul Corry, Barry Murphy and Méabh de Búrca to reflect on the latest developments in Irish football this past week. And there have been quite a few. We'd love to focus completely on the League of Ireland title race and chat about the two women's FAI Cup semi-finals that are coming up this weekend. And we will touch on them, but unfortunately we can't start there because it's been a bad week for Irish football by any metric. And as we record this podcast, the existence of one of our biggest and most successful clubs is in serious doubt. Dundalk released a statement on Sunday evening to say the next 24 hours are critical for the future of the club. And they are in very real danger of being wound up due to major financial issues. Um, Barry, I think I might just start with you because if you can offer us your own update on the understanding of the situation at Oriel Park. Obviously, it's not good, but where are they right now in terms of the future of Dundalk Football Club?
Yeah, I've done some digging on it, and yeah, these are the facts. The situation is, as they said, it's absolutely critical. There's a deadline given by the owner of five today for potential investors to come in, or the club will be liquidated, and that's been confirmed from a number of sources within kind of close to the situation. Uh, First of all, Dundalk just can't go to the wall and come back as Dundalk 2.0. Those days are gone. They can't apply for a license for next year. The licenses for next year is currently underway, and the current entity is who has applied for that license. So it's not going to roll back. That's Dundalk have applied for it. So they can't come back. Those days are actually gone. So they've gone to, if they go to the liquidator today, they're gone as a club. If they go into a form of examination called SCARP, then they're still alive as an entity and they may have to take a points deduction and they'll end up in the first division. But anything other than folding is really a win today. If they do get into SCARP, they just need to keep the operational costs going at the bare minimum to survive. And I don't just mean just flippantly, it's still a huge expense. It's about 20 grand a week for player wages. You're looking at 360 grand to keep them going to the end of the season.
And
But if
just
you do, yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, Barry, but just that SCARP, that's a small company administrative rescue process. So this is
yeah,
a 45-day process for insolvent companies, smaller companies with a turnover below 5 million and fewer than 50 employees. But that is a short-term fix, really.
yeah, it basically, so what it does, if the owner can find an investment to keep the operating costs until the end of the season, then and they do get into SCARP, they can reset the balance sheets and be cleaned up, the debts will be rolled down, they can come out of examship and possibly survive. So basically it gives them a chance to work on the operational and find a but they're protected from the creditors, and that runs for about 49 days at the end of the season. But if the club gets liquidated today, the league table's turned on its head. 8 games to go in the closest race in years. Shells would lose 10 points, Derry 5, and Derry go a point clear. You know, the European places would crumble. Waterford would lose 10 points and drop to third bottom. Shamrock Rovers up to fourth. And the hope, speaking from people in the club, is that somebody comes in with an investment, whether it be a collection of local people, a benefactor, or whatever it takes to clear the weekly operating costs and get them into SCARP, and then give the club a chance to reset. But they're also looking for about 1.5 million to be written off. But the main point is that short-term funding is needed for operational costs and wages to keep the doors open. And there's like a narrative around about the players and how wages have gone up as well, and it's just not the case as well. The players have offered to defer the wages by 1 or 2 weeks to try and help, and they've actually their average wage at Dundalk is 37,000. It's like it's standard living stuff, you know. It's nobody on huge wages, and um, like you don't want to see any team liquidated, and especially when the results are expunged. And going into SCARP would see the club reported to the license committee, but did have a points deduction and a possible relegation to the first division, but it doesn't upset the league table. And you know, just in terms of speaking, there is so much going for the club as well. Like in terms of people buying it and potential investors, there's a few from America who are interested, who seem to have pulled out over the weekend. But there's a government grant of 500 grand that's been earmarked for oil redevelopment for any new potential owner. And there's only 9 contracted players for next season. So it's not as if to come in and negotiate a huge amount of player contracts and get players released on massive money. So there is massive potential there to do something. And as terrible as Kilkenny, Monaghan, and some of the other clubs going out of the league is, this club is an institution. You know, it's people's jobs. They're out within a Friday night. They're happy to live in town, and it just has to be safe. But I can't stress how dire the situation is at the moment.
Yeah, Paul, as Barry outlines there, I mean, we have seen this before in the League of Ireland, that's this sort of boom and bust for clubs, but this does feel different. Like this is a club that in very recent times has made the Europa League group stages twice. The last time in 2020, a great club. And I mean, by this time, as we record this on a Monday sort of morning, this time Monday even, I mean, they could be wound up. It's just really sad, Paul, isn't it? Above anything else, and we can sort of get into the intricacies of and ask how this has come to this point and where the money has gone. With all those successes in recent years. But above all, it's just such a sad, grim state of affairs.
Yeah, very much is, Anthony. And you mentioned there, they've had great successes in recent times. They've produced great players and they've had some great times. But it wasn't too long ago that the narrative around Dundalk was almost around a worry that they were going to become this dominant force like a Rosenborg, whereby they would just be so dominant and almost have a monopoly within the league. And to think about how different the narrative is today is extremely worrying. I mean, it's gross mismanagement of finances within the club. You think of some of the players that they've brought in, some of the wages that they've spent has been a waste. It's no other way of putting it. You think of the money that they would have taking in and the revenues they would have achieved from their Europa League campaigns, and you still look at the infrastructure of the club and it hasn't really changed. Yes, they have had a situation whereby they've improved the training ground and certain elements around the whole training ground experience, but the stadium remains the same, and the infrastructure around the club hasn't really changed, and the players who were taking big wages have come and gone, and that's the really disappointing element. And then
Right.
it's just alarming about how quickly this situation has escalated from hearing about the difficulties to what Barry has mentioned there about almost being liquidated in the next couple of hours or couple of days. So it's really worrying. We really want to focus in on the title challenge that is happening between Derry and Shelbourne at the moment. We want to look forward to the venture that Shamrock Rovers are about to have into European campaigns, but it seems like there's always a bit of a story that pulls us back into the problems that we have within the domestic game. And you think about how much the domestic game is starved of investment into its infrastructure. We're looking for money from government, and this story is just ammunition for people who don't want to give it to us.
Maeve, if I can ask you from a player's perspective, like I mean, it's like, can you even sort of envision how difficult this is for the players? Because I have on my notes Dundalk lost at Waterford 2-1 on Friday, and you're kind of thinking maybe chatting about some of the defending or some of the the ins and outs of that game. It's sort of like, well, how can you possibly do that when you look at the situation the players themselves are in? It must be really difficult to kind of try and stay focused and try and get to train and be professional in a scenario where the club you're playing for might be gone later this week.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and like it's their livelihoods at stake. At the end of the day, it's their job. Players, it must be extremely hard to turn up to training and know this is going on in the background. But the fans as well. I mean, like said, it mightn't exist. This time tomorrow. But I suppose my day job is an accountant, and this isn't something that happens overnight. Like there has to be serious questions over who's making the financial decisions there. I mean, it's not something like said that the situation from the public side is so quick, like it's gone has to have been going down a slippery slope for months. It's not something there have to be, I don't know, just it's internal matters really that needs to be looked at. Like how can it be that gross mismanagement from a financial perspective? They know they have to have like projections, they have to have budgets, have to have their cash flow. If they know 20 grand is going out a week on players' wages, like that's not going to change, and it's it's a sad situation, and yeah, you would feel for the players in particular at this stage.
Yeah, sorry, Barry, just to come back to you, just to be clear, like the licensing, their license for this season was awarded actually under the old ownership
Yeah.
of Stat Sports. Brian Ainscott took over a month after the license was awarded. Just for anyone wondering, how could they be cleared to play this season if those sort of issues were underlying and apparent with it? The FAI also have been clear because they had their AGM on Saturday, which we will chat about in a little bit, but that they won't be bailing out Dundalk. From their point of view, that they're a private enterprise. They can't come in here to save them. I think they have forwarded some prize money. They have forwarded that early to them to try and help, but ultimately, the issues are that the figures involved here are much too large for that to in any way cover it. It's plugging a small gap, I think. So this is and very serious.
Yeah, well, you just hear the minister's words today. He said, basically, my thoughts and prayers are with Dundalk. I'll be thinking of them today. That doesn't bode well for any club looking for kind of any help from government sources. But yeah, it's done halfway through the season, basically the licensing for next year. So last year's it would have been the previous owners going into this year, and it would have been again going into next year. But when you look at players as well, you talk about how harsh it is on players. The transfer window is only closed a couple of weeks. Why wasn't this said to the players a couple of weeks ago? Listen, we're going down a slippery path here. I'm going to let you all go. Want those who want to stay on, the younger lads who are willing to fight for and play for lower wages, you can hang around. But these players have been tied down to contracts. Darrell Horgan got a new multi-year contract. How is that signed off? And who is that signed off by in the club? You're signing. It's just cruel. It's disgraceful behaviour from the owner. And as well as talking to a couple of players, they're in having lunch, and then the people who are supplying the lunches are coming in and collecting all the gear and saying that's basically it now for the hot food after lunch. Basic stuff as a professional player, it's now going to be gone from the team.
Yeah, it's desperate. It is desperate, and look, as I said, that's the state of play as we record this podcast. But within the next 7 or 8 hours, the picture could be clearer, and unfortunately, a lot grimmer. Paul, I don't want to stay too downbeat, but just to stay on the theme of financial struggles and a bad need for an injection of cash. I just want to chat a little bit about the FAI AGM, which occurred on Saturday. There was quite a bit that, as you can imagine, that came up at that AGM, but the FAI did use it as a pitch to sort of, again, just reiterate what they're looking for and what they need to try and raise the standards of the game here, even just beyond basic levels, really. It's just worth reminding people of what they are looking for from the government. They're looking for over 500 million in government money over the next 15 years. But the case they're making this, they have been clear about how where they think that kind of money can come from, and it's the betting levy. They want to raise the betting levy from 2% to 3%. That could potentially bring another 50 million euro to the state every year, and the FAI would want 30 million of that, given football accounts for I think more bets than sport in this country year to year. So there's no silver bullet with these things, Paul, but that type of stuff does make sense, and could help in the sort of medium to short term to start getting things back on track. What's your sort of view on that kind of plea? Have they got a genuine case for the FAI? Like, is this everybody's got the ball out in terms of looking for investment, but it just seems like it's so chronically underfunded now, and something has to change very quickly.
Yeah, it's desperately needed, Anthony, and particularly from a facility perspective. I mean, you just need to go around the grounds and around the training grounds of the different clubs to understand what sort of level of investment is needed. You compare our game to any other league across Europe, and it seems like we are still quite a bit away when it comes to facilities. And we talk about the production of players, getting players into first teams, getting players into international squads. It all starts with facilities, and it needs to improve. I think this Dundalk situation does highlight, though, that if the FAI are to be successful in securing some funding, I think the plan needs to be so drilled down into ABC of where this money is going to go, how it's going to be spent, who's going to look after, and who's going to carry out on the different projects or the different processes they're going to be implemented. Because unfortunately, when you look at clubs and you look about that gross mismanagement that I spoke of earlier, you can't sit here and say with 100% confidence that money is going to be spent exactly where it says it's going to be spent. I think if that funding is to be secured, the plan needs to be so robust that there's no sort of lingering questions in government's head about whether or not they can actually trust this process. So it's desperately needed. The grounds are one thing, the training grounds are another. And if we are to keep participation levels where they are, if we want to grow participation within the country, you have to be able to open up good facilities to young kids, particularly when they're in that developmental stage. And improving the standard of coaching, improving the whole environment around those players is absolutely pivotal. If we don't do that, expect the Nations League results to remain the same, expect us to kind of come down in rankings, because what we've seen over the last 10, 15 years is that whatever process we were following hasn't worked, and we haven't produced enough players. Brexit has obviously put another hurdle in place whereby we actually need to develop our own talent as opposed to ship it across the water. So yeah, it's the infrastructure is the absolute foundation for everything in my mind. And if we can get a big chunk of funding from the government, that would be superb. But the plan needs to be so robust.
And just to underscore that, the FAI have disbanded their emerging talent program. Maybe, I mean, just
yes,
and that puts even more pressure on League of Ireland clubs to hone and develop talent in academies that are not equipped to do it because they don't have the funds.
yeah. I mean, that was the biggest, I think, disappointment nearly that I took away from it. Like I would have been one of the first years on the emerging talent program where at that stage we were mixed in with the boys, and like it was pivotal like to my own development, say as an international. And without that, I don't know how, obviously they're putting the onus now back on the League of Ireland clubs, but at that like crucial age between 12 and 15, I think they originally had 12 emerging talent centres across the country, and that had been cut previously to 8, and now obviously it's cut completely. So I think that's huge, like putting that entire onus on the players, on the clubs, isn't good enough, because you're not getting then the best players in the region training together, and that's how the standards are going to be raised. So yeah, that for me was definitely the biggest disappointment. And I think something like that isn't taking a huge amount of the funding. I think it could have been maybe taken from other areas that aren't as pivotal in the development of the players.
Corry, can you just expand on that also? Because when people look at, I mean, there's so many people come to Irish football, and maybe their only investment in Irish football is watching the national team. It's a fractured sporting landscape here. But when they see Ireland struggling now, they can't understand it. What's happening, and they hark back to the glory days of the Charlton era. But I mean, is it fair to say that it kind of starts with just exactly as Méabh has outlined there? It starts with things like the emerging talent program. Like, we are so far behind competing. Forget about England. We're so far behind Greece and even countries like Kosovo now, who started to pump money into the grassroots end of the game. Like, just how important is it to get players between the ages of, let's say, 8 to 14, extra contact errors, like development alongside the best of the best? And how big a blow is it to lose something like the emerging talent, the development program, with that in mind?
Yeah, it's absolutely huge, because they haven't said what they're going to do to replace it, what's going in instead of it. Basically, you look at the fruits of what's come from the emerging talent program. You're probably kind of only seeing the fruit now coming into the 19s and the 21s. You've got good players in it now, but they've kind of gone through a couple of years of that system. But it's gone back on the clubs now, even just from doing my analysis of the games over in weeken'd with Shamrock Rovers, looking at the Iceland model. Every centre, every kind of community area had this new pitch built and a new community centre built. All of the Euro money went on that, basically. I think it was 50% of the Euro money they got from that time they beat England in the Euros from that era went on facilities for infrastructure, basically. And you had to keep kids in that area, and they had to use that facility. So there was no clubs going to, or no players going to the bigger clubs too early, where the top 2-3 teams were the best teams in the country. It was spread out all over the country, and as so the funds were spread out all over the country. But that's just not done here, and that's probably one of the shining lights of the current FAI year was the emerging talent program. That's just thrown to the side now.
Yeah, and even like at a very grassroots level, Barry, I think anyone involved in an amateur team, kids, or even up to senior level, like, we are now going to go into another winter. It's going to be wet, and every year it seems to get worse in terms of games called off, lack of artificial pitches, the facilities, like some of the pitches and the council pitches, not fit for purpose. It just feels like from the top right down to the very bottom, there's so many issues.
Yeah, there is. Like, I've always fortunate enough to coach up in Shamrock Rovers, and obviously they've got help from different funding things, but the facilities up there are as good as anywhere in England, and St. Pat's as well now out in the FAI, using their grounds for their training purposes. But all over the clubs in Ireland we're slowly getting better. But just things like this, and the news again today, and as Paul was talking about the funding going down, how it has to be earmarked for specific things. That's going to be the massive thing now, because you just don't know where with Dundalk, your wage bill is supposed to be 65% of your income is all you could spend on it, but they're definitely spending more than that on the first team. So what's going down through the club levels, through the underage levels at Dundalk? And when you think of Dundalk going as well, just to go back to that, you're losing all those youth teams as well. Where are those players going to go? Like, you're not just losing the first team, you're losing the whole club. How many teams that boys and girls who are just suddenly getting into the game over the last couple of years, going to ranked, and now they've no team to play for.
Yeah, just before we move on from this, Méabh, we also did hear from Hannah Dingley, that's the FAI's head of women's and girls football. Now, she announced a new women's leadership program, which is due to begin in October. So it'll be an opportunity for women to participate in a year-long industry-leading leadership program. It was also mentioned that the success of the women's team helped to alleviate some of the financial burden on the FAI because of the fans like Viva Stadium games, and obviously the achievements at the Women's World Cup in 2023. So there's stuff to build on there. How are you feeling about all of this? I mean, are things moving in the right direction, or is it again like just a case of more required, some good work done, but a lot more needed?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of one step forward, two steps back at times, and it does seem like that. But obviously that leadership program is promising, and the fact that the women's team can now be revenue generating for the association is definitely a positive, when it would have previously not been there because the interest just wasn't there from fans to get them in the gate. But yeah, I know they also addressed Paul Cook addressed the fact of the sexual abuse scandal that had come out as well previously, and how that kind of has damaged the reputation further, or even the brand in some ways of the association. And it's kind of just the public interest isn't as positive around it. And also, I suppose, the fact that they announced the new senior manager the same week that storyline came out as well didn't leave I think a good taste in a lot of people's mouths too. So it's kind of yeah, a bit of a mix, I think, came out of it really from a women's perspective too. Was some positives moving in the right direction, and then some other negatives still lingering.
No, absolutely. Some good work done on the pitch, but certainly a lot more required off the field to sustain that and build on it further. Let's chat a little bit about the football then, Paul. Derry City bet Shelbourne 2-0. They are into the FAI Cup semi-finals. Rory Higgins not happy with the Dublin media, not giving him his team their dues in his opinion, but they were very good, Paul, to be fair to them, in that win, a convincing win, I think, over Shelbourne.
Yeah, absolutely. Opposite of Derry, whereby their home form was probably their Achilles last year. They've really tidied up at home, and they've become quite a formidable force. And to be honest with you, there was a couple of gears, I thought, between the two sides on the weekend. I think what's probably a little bit worrying for Shells at this moment of time is not only the results and the lack of consistency. It seems like the performances maybe dropped a level or two. And yes, the loss of Jarvis is certainly proving a massive void because they don't score a huge amount of goals. But when you look at the performances of the two sides on the weekend, it felt like Derry were a step or two above Shelbourne. And I think it's so important at this stage of the season that you get the likes of your Michael Duffy's firing and scoring big goals and big moments, because that is potentially what is going to separate sides when it comes down to it in these fine margins. But Derry absolutely full value for their win, and it probably gives them just an extra little step, I think, Anthony, as they head into kind of the remaining fixtures within this season. They seem to be playing well. They're probably still not, like Rory's come out and said complained about the Dublin media and not getting up to see games. Yes, I take his point, but they haven't really won enough games to be kind of coming out and batting against people. I'm not sure if it's kind of this siege mentality that he's trying to create within the squad, everybody against us, but they've still been, pretty inconsistent themselves, but at home have been good. And I think they proved on the weekend that they are certainly going to be there or thereabouts in both competitions come the end of the season.
Well, both competitions is right. I mean, I feel like I keep asking you about Shelbourne and they're spluttering and maybe not massively convincing people with their performances, and obviously the loss of Jarvis is huge for them. But would they be particularly concerned about the nature of that loss, like to the team that's breathing down their necks and who did look, it was quite comprehensive?
Yeah, I would think so. there were probably a few uncharacteristic mistakes. Just conceding possession in sloppy areas and just not being tidy on the ball that we probably haven't seen throughout this season. I mean, the setup has been really good. The lack of mistakes that they've made has really, I guess, been the foundation that Shelbourne has been built on. The goals have always been a struggle. I mean, they've only scored 32 goals in 29 league games, and clean sheets has maybe been what's got them to where they are today. And it feels like if they are to go on and win the league, clean sheets is certainly going to be what's going to get them there. The goals just don't seem to come. The chances aren't, there in great numbers in different games. And I think that would be a bit of a worry. And there just seems to be a little bit of nervousness amongst the squad as they get to this stage of the season. Shamrock Rovers play Derry on Friday night. If Rovers were to get a result there, take points off Derry, and Shells were to win and extend that gap, that would certainly help. But it certainly feels like if Derry were to get in striking distance, or if Shamrock Rovers would put a run together, you could definitely see a bit of tension within that Chelsea squad. And that was very evident on the weekend, just with some of the mistakes that I mentioned there and just their lack of ability to create chances. So there'll be a nervousness amongst the squad. Damien Duff has come out and said that if you gave him this situation at the beginning of the season, he absolutely would have taken it and the squad would have taken it. And they're in pole position. But there is definitely just a bit of nervousness amongst everyone at Shelbourne at the moment.
What's it like as a player, May, with that sort of anxiety? It would mean so much to Shells. I mean, they are, no one would have really dreamed about being in this position, I think, at the start of the season. It was clear they were kind of moving in the right direction, but, it's got to affect people. Does it tighten you up a little? Start to overthink things a little bit, that the pressure has that kind of impact when you get to this part of the season?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they haven't won a league title since 2006, I think it is. So like they wouldn't have much of I suppose experience maybe there in that sense. But it's personally, I think it may even come down to that. I think the last game of the season is the repeat of the game at the weekend. So it'd be between Derry and Shells, I think, at the Brandywell. So it could end up coming to that. But yeah, in terms of, I think from the players' side, yeah, they're just going to have to, I think, try just their leaders are going to have to show up, and try carry them through, because like that, it's so tight at the top at the moment that they are going to have to the more experienced players are just going to have to bring on the younger ones through it, and obviously from their perspective, hopefully come out the other side. And it mightn't be a bad thing from their side that they're out of the cup, because they can completely focus on the league now, and obviously that's their only choice. Whereas obviously Derry are still going to be they're going to be focusing on the cup as well, so it might at times could go against them.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a fair point. They now have one thing to focus on, and what a massive carrot it is for them. But what about that semi-final? It's Bowes in the semis for Derry. Bowes got past UCD 4-0, pretty straightforward for them. They just had a bit too much. A couple of goals for Ross Tierney there, as you would expect. Just a little bit too much quality for UCD. Bowes have had it's not been a great year, but I don't know, Paul. I don't know if they've been as bad as the results have generally suggested over the last sort of month in particular. Maybe some signs that things are just starting to steady at the right time for both.
Yeah, I think in the last month, 6 weeks, I've been down to Dalymount quite a bit, and I've seen a lot of them, and maybe some of the results weren't reflecting some of the performances that they'd put together. There was probably situations whereby they weren't being clinical in front of goal and they weren't scoring enough goals, and then also maybe conceding sloppy chances and conceding points along the way. But I thought all along that there was hope within the side. I think that the signings have made a huge difference, particularly Dawson Devoy coming in to anchor the midfield and just conduct things for them. And then obviously Tierney's goals have been huge with just getting them over the line in certain games. So there's a confidence, I think, amongst the squad, and there's a belief definitely amongst the fans in Dalymount that recent performances have really changed the narrative amongst the squad. I thought they were very good when they played Shells in recent weeks. And obviously the result against UCD is maybe what you would expect, but at the same time could have been a banana skin fixture. The semi-final, I think there's two ways of looking at the draw here, Anthony. Like at some point you would imagine Bowes are probably going to have to play Derry. just with the teams that were left in the competition. I think if I was a Bows fan, I would rather that game be played in Dalymount Park than Lansdowne Road. I think you have a better opportunity of going beyond Derry with the home fans behind them and just the performances that they've shown in recent weeks. And I think that will suit them. Games been very tight between the two sides this year. Some of both players have really stepped up in recent weeks. Danny Grant, for me, is somebody who's probably taken a while to find his feet since he came back from the UK. He's been brilliant in recent weeks. You can see in his game when he's confident, he gets at players, he's direct, he'll take people on. I think always with wide players, when there's probably a little of, a lack of confidence in their game, they're probably more hesitant to grab people and maybe take easy options. He's been brilliant. And like I mentioned, Devoy, Tierney, and the back four looks a little more solid as well. They're in a really good place. They're in a really, really good place. That's going to be a really tight semi-final. And for me, whoever wins that is probably going to be the winner of this competition.
Well, I mean, Wexford and Drogheda United, Barry might have something to say about that, but it is understandable. That's a blockbuster game on the 6th of October, Sunday, 6th of October. But let's talk about the other two, because one of them is going to be in the FAI Cup final, Drogheda United or Wexford. That's great, to be honest. I mean, there's been a big thing about record attendances in the last few years at the Aviva for the Cup final. It's such a brilliant day. Realistically, and it's no disrespect to either of those clubs, I think if that's not going to happen this year. They just don't have large enough fan bases. But still, it's a massive opportunity. I mean, I look at Drogheda United in particular, home semi-final against the First Division club, and down in Drogheda, they're such a tough game for anybody in the Premier Division. For Kevin Doherty, who's done fantastic work down there over the last couple of years, this is a hell of a chance to get that team to a cup final.
Yeah, and from outside perspectives, the measure of how the league is going is kind of being measured by European performances and the capacity in the cup final. But it's more than that for these provincial teams and towns like Derry and Drogheda. It's absolutely massive. Drogheda have a great tradition in the cup as well down through the years. But you look at their position in the league, and it doesn't show a true reflection of the quality in that team, especially over the last couple of weeks with James Taylor and Piero up front. They're a handful for anyone. They gave Sean Groves a dogged time up in Tala a couple of times this season, and they're more of a measure of where they are in the last couple of weeks as a team. Really, the results they put together and the job Kevin has done. But I think like I can see them beating Wexford and putting up that either of those teams in the final. I think that the pressure is on neither of those teams going up against Drogheda in the final, and that'll suit them because they've been underdogs everywhere they've gone all season and picked up some incredible results. And with those two up front, a handful for anyone, they can cause a huge upset on the day.
Yeah. So if I was to press you now on your winner of the cup, if you're sticking a euro,
Yeah.
where's your money?
I go with Derry. I think Derry will have too much for Bows. I just think that they've got quality and Bows are too hit and miss at the moment. They've shown great quality as Paul has said since the lads have come back in. Tierney, Devoy, Grant has shown real over the last couple of weeks. Setting up a goal the other day as well. But I just think they've just got too much quality in Derry in the cup that they can bring off the bench as well and change games. And coming into that part of the season now where you've got a bit of momentum going with what could possibly happen with the Dundalk situation as well. They could go top of the league, so you're looking at a double as well. That's another side of the equation. I just think they'll have too much for both on the day, and then for either Wexford or Drogheda in the final.
Well, lots to look forward to, and a couple of really, really good cup semi-finals still, probably for different reasons. But yeah, it would be entertaining for sure. I'm sure a great weekend, and then of course that great day, the cup final day. It's always such a great day in Irish football. One of our best days of the year. Méabh, there is of course two semi-finals this weekend to look forward to. The FAI Women's Cup. On Saturday, it's Shells against Cork City, and then Sligo Rovers host Athlone Town 24 hours later. Let's start with Shells and Cork City. Shells beaten finalists last year. Heavily fancied to get back there. I think it's fair to say that. Méabh, how do you see this one going?
Definitely, yeah, they're definitely favourites to get through to the final. Like Cork are only sitting in 8th place in the table, have had a relatively disappointing season, I suppose, whereas Shells are flying it at the moment. They will be disappointed they lost at the final last year on penalties, and they didn't win the league either. So for the women's team standards, like to not win a trophy was a huge disappointment for them. So yeah, they're still in it with a chance of the double really. So they're there's Cork will be up against it on away as well. Will be a tough one for them.
the following day, Athlone Town go to Sligo, and that they'll be heavy favourites to win that. Athlone under Kieran Culduff, it sort of feels like the Renaissance started. You know, they're in the hot, they're in control to also Athlone, points clear with a game in hand as we enter the last few matches of that. So they're on for a double, as are Shells, who are chasing them. But this whole momentum with Athlone, it probably started with the cup. It probably started, so I think it was last July. Kieran came in June, and they just feel like they built up this real positive momentum now under him, and built on the good work that was done under Tommy Hewitt before he came in, but they were sort of stagnating a little bit. Where are they now compared to, say, a year ago in terms of the strength that they have?
Yeah, they're definitely. I think what they have now is they have consistency. Obviously winning a cup you can have a good cup run, whereas winning a league title is completely different. It's obviously throughout the whole season you need to be consistent, and they definitely have that. I think they've kind of grown, organically as a club as well. They've put the development in, and they haven't just, the likes of, say, Shamrock Rovers, who came into the league, may have, taken a lot of players from other clubs, whereas they have brought up the players through the system too. But they, at the same time, they have had a really welcome additions as well, and they seem to be hitting form as well now at the right time too. But they do have a difficult run in terms of they have to face Galway in the last game of the season too, which, much like the men, it could come down to that last game of the season too. But yeah, in terms of the semi-final against Sligo, I think Athlone will be looking nothing less than a win. They'll be hot favourites as well to get through to that. But they have a lot of leadership there as well. Like Captain Laurie Ryan as well she's driving them on, and she's a lot of experience in Gaelic football too. So I think her, along with the management team, I think have been a real positive there for Athlone. So yeah, I think I foresee a repeat of last year's final, in that I would imagine that both Shells and Athlone would win, but obviously Sligo and Cork won't. They'll be looking to have a different say in that.
Can you just sort of give us an insight what Athlone, Méabh, because obviously they're up against Dublin clubs who have advantages geographically, the same as in the men's game, but they've developed and attracted a lot of good players the last sort of 3 years. What is it that's going on there that's helping them to have sustained success or be sustained challengers in the league and in the cups?
I think they have kept a lot of their players too. And the one thing, obviously, within the Dublin clubs, there tends to be a lot of player hopping from club to club, in different seasons, where if players aren't getting into starting 11 in one club, they'll just bounce to the next club to try get in. And I suppose with that loan been central as well. Although it's not particularly close to a high populated area in that sense, but it's very easy to get to as well. So they have a big catchment area. Even a couple of players from Galway WFC a few seasons ago would have gone to them, because that loan would have seemed to be moving in a quicker direction, in the right direction quicker. So they would have pulled players like that as well, alongside them. But now they've managed to retain those players, because obviously they're providing the quality of training, and their pitch as well. The all-weather pitch in Athlone Town Stadium is a great advantage to them. I remember last year when we were coaching with underdogs, we were looking to get all-weather pitch anywhere in the country, and literally Athlone was the only one available. So it definitely gives them an advantage. They can train at any time of the night as well. Yeah, it's definitely an advantage.
Yeah, and they are absolutely informed. As mentioned, they remain top of the league. They bet 3-0 at the weekend. They're 2 points clear of Shelbourne and Galway United, who are having a really good season, back in second and third respectively. Galway won 4-0 at the DLR Waves. Cork City and Wexford played out a 0-0 draw. Peamount bet Bowls 4-2, and Shamrock Rovers played out a 1-1 draw with Sligo. And as mentioned, those two FAI Cup semi-finals take place this weekend. Shells and Cork on Saturday, and then Sligo Rovers against Athlone Town on Sunday. Let's just move on and have a little bit of Premier League talk, Paul. But again, unfortunately, I can't really focus on the football end of things, at least not immediately, because today is a very, very significant day, maybe one of the most significant days ever in the history of the Premier League, because an independent commission there is an independent commission hearing to examine 115 charges laid by the Premier League against Manchester City. That begins today, as we record this podcast, on Monday, 16th of September. And again, you can't possibly, or I find it very difficult to talk about City, who are an outstanding team. There's no question about that. But when we're talking about their inverted fullbacks and the depth they have on the bench, you kind of feel like you have to caveat with these charges, which just hang over them like a cloud, and potentially annihilate the integrity of that league within that period that these charges are sort of take place between 2008, 2009 and in actual fact every season between 2009 and 10 and the 2022-23 season. So this is an absolutely potentially monumental day today and period today for the Premier League.
Yeah, I think everyone will welcome this at Manchester City, to be honest with you, Anthony, because I think a lot of the success that they've had in recent years obviously has that asterisk beside it, and you know, is probably just a hindrance that they would like to kind of remove from their football club. So yeah, it's going to be an extremely long and drawn out process. You would imagine the fact that there's 115 charges to get through would make you believe that this is going to go on for months and months. And the resources that Man City have, you can imagine they've got best in class lawyers to fight their case. I can probably separate the two, to be honest with you. Maybe not with the players that they brought in, but I can absolutely admire the job that Pep Guardiola has done in developing that team, in the play that he's able to implement, and the success that he's had on the pitch. I can probably separate the two, but yes, I absolutely take into consideration that they wouldn't have been able to bring in some of the players that they have done had they, you know, not been accused of what they've been accused of. It certainly feels, anyway, looking at the league and how it started, that maybe the only thing from stopping Manchester City from winning another Premier League title is these charges and how this actually plays out. For me, I think like the Premier League, if they were to you know, be successful in this case, probably could have narrowed it down from 150 and 15 and maybe focused on a smaller number and actually tried pin Man City on some of the more hefty violations that they have. That it's 100 would make me worried that they'll find holes and jump through them and find a way around this case. But I think for the Premier League as a whole, the fact that Leicester City managed to escape, if Manchester City were to be successful as well, it would put a couple of questions around that whole profit and sustainability rules and how successful they can actually be if the top dogs are maybe able to kind of dodge some of those rulings.
Yeah, I mean, Barry, it's sort of like the fact that whatever way this goes, this could affect the diplomatic relations between the UK and the United Arab Emirates, because the city owner, Sheikh Mansour, is the deputy prime minister there. Now, that in itself would suggest that things have got they've lost control here. Like, this goes way beyond football. This is so seismic and interesting, I guess, but again, in its own way. I mean, we're talking about like the existential crisis of Dundalk and within the League of Ireland, and this is obviously on a much bigger scale, but still, it's that core issue of football people losing control of the football side of things. And this now, as I mentioned, like, I mean, the whole integrity of the Premier League is at stake with this.
Yeah, it's nice to know it's not just our league that has problems with it as well, and they
More
can take a
money,
line
more
right off
profit.
her. Yeah, exactly. But can only imagine what that sort of money you do in our league. But yeah, I'd be more a bit hard lined than Paul's position would be, in thinking that, for me, I think it's cheating. I think it's gaining an advantage over your clubs in your league. I think you're basically throwing fair play out the window when you can sign players knowing that you're breaking rules, and other teams are trying to adhere to them and maybe going for those same players in contract negotiations and losing out and wondering why you're losing out. And you can see that maybe this will all come to light at the start this week. But as Paul said, 115 charges is probably too much. You do need to narrow it down. It'll bring the timeline in as well, allow this sooner, and it just kind of reeks a little bit of throwing mud at the wall and hoping something sticks, that you do get them on something. And that's just not what you want as well. You don't want them to kind of go, right, we'll plead guilty to these lesser charges and get off the real ones that really matter, and that could have real repercussions on their place in the league and their title gone by so far.
And Méabh City have been averred a strong confidence that they're going to clear their name with all this. Do you suspect that could be the case?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to call because we don't know the ins and outs of it, I suppose, at this stage. But it's whatever decisions they make, it's going to set a real precedent. Like, because if they are getting away with it, again, then other teams are going to bend those rules as well. Like, it's not there's no black and white then, and then you wonder, why are the rules in place at all if they can be broken. So um personally, as a Man United fan, I wouldn't mind to see them, get thrown under the bus a little bit. But yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see how it all develops.
Yeah, well, they're too big, like Anthony. They're never going to be relegated, are they? They're never going to want to lose Man City as an asset out of the Premier League and the money that brings in. And obviously, then when you think about diplomatic relationships between the UAE and the UK, like, there's so much at play here that I'm sure this will meander so many times over the coming months. Innocent until proven guilty. I think they might get away with this.
Innocent until Pep leaves. That's what the situation will be.
We will see. I mean, technically, you're hearing that they could be relegated and they could have those titles taken off them if they were to be found guilty. But we have to wait and see. Just very quickly then, because we have got some Champions League action live on RTE this week. Celtic and Slovan Bratislava are on Wednesday from 7:30 on RTE2 and the player. And then the following night, Arsenal from 7:30 on again on RTE2 and the RTE player. You looking forward to this new Swiss model, Méabh? More games, more big team collisions. Is that a good thing, or are we all just getting a little fatigued now that there's nearly too much football?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the latter there. I think in theory it might be good, but I think there's also, as well as a lot of top clashes, there's going to be a lot of mediocre clashes too, and it might drain energy from the players who are competing at the top in their leagues as well. But I think it gives the lesser teams better chances as well, to fight it out against the top things, but the top teams. But it's going to be interesting. But I think 8 match days to look forward to, or to, I don't know if look forward to is the right word, but it's going to be a lot longer process as well to go through. But I suppose they'll go into it with an open mind and see how it works out this season. And I don't think then they'll be only after how they see how it develops this season is whether they'll keep with that format or revert back to what we're used to.
Yeah, the other element, Barry, is player welfare and fatigue, just physical fatigue with players. Like, I mean, the players are starting to come out and air their own concerns around that. I think Akanji today suggested, like, he's the latest Manchester City defender, said, I might have to retire by the time I'm 30. Is that legitimate? Is it too intense for players? Expect them to keep playing these type of games like every 3 days?
Yeah, it absolutely is legitimate. I think you're playing a game every 3 games, probably 60 odd games a season. And then you've also got UEFA now battling against FIFA. FIFA started their own tournament now in the winter that they'll want to compete with the Champions League with this kind of Champions Cup as well going on. So you've got that as well. So you've got players that the last teams can this situation. Just, yeah, they're so highly paid and this and that, but your highly paid players aren't going to be playing week in, week out because they're going to be on the sideline injured, and that's what you're going to be dealing with. It's hard enough to play a league game and then go play up the road at Bows 3 days later or whatever in Ireland. Never mind traveling halfway across Europe to do it. So it's going to take a toll on these players.
Yeah, Paul, this is where Chelsea come into their own now because they've got 100 players on the books. I know they've got to trim the squad, but yeah, would you agree with Barry's points there? It is sort of getting to the point where players may just actually take a stand on this, say we can't continue to do this. It's not safe.
I think as long as the salaries are there, I think Akanji and co will be happy to go on into the mid-30s, but the calendar is becoming extremely condensed. You only have to look at some of the off seasons and how short they are for some of the players before they come out of a major tournament with their nations and then straight back into important league games with their clubs. So that is a bit of a worry. I think the one caveat to it, though, particularly with the likes of, say, a Manchester City or a Chelsea, they've got massive squads. Like, you only have to look at the bench that Man City had on the weekend to understand the strength and depth that they have there, and they are more than capable of pulling players out and putting players of a similar standard in. And I think managing that squad is probably becoming one of the most important things that those top managers have to do, with the number of games that they have to play, and trying to get people to peak for big games and for certain periods of the season is so important. And particularly when you look at what Man City have done in recent years. So yeah, I have an element of sympathy, but the Champions League is obviously going to put in a couple of more fixtures. I still think you'll probably end up with the same 4 or 6 teams come the end of the competition. You can probably pick out who's going to be there. Like I think Méabh mentioned there, it gives an opportunity for maybe some of the smaller teams to pick up points along the way, but I still think you'll end up with the same result, and you'll still have the same players playing the same amount of games, but still earning ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it there. Shamrock Rovers start their own European odyssey in the Conference League a little bit later. And we really look forward to that. And of course, they'll take on here we go, split allegiances from when they play Chelsea, Paul.
Yeah, I won't comment on that one just
yeah, just a reminder as well, we do have Derry and Shamrock Rovers live on RTE2 on the RTE player this Friday night from 7:35. Thanks again to Méabh, Barry and Paul for joining us this week. We'll be back again next Monday for more of the same. Good luck.